What's happening, Nerdtopians? Welcome to Nerdtopia. I'm Doolin Dalton, and let's go ahead and get ready for another round of nerdy goodness.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting in the corner of Dr. Doom's basement, but he's our homie, so we never ever pay rent. N to the E to the R-D-topia, like a plasma cannon man, you know we're steady smoking. Yep, comics, books, movies, and video games are our claim to fame and recognition and name. We've changed the reign, but kept it the same, and we hope to gain acclaim from time of the game. We're coming at you repeating from Walking Dead, and you know we got pissed when the Redding ran red. A plethora of guests, even more than Bill and Ted. The ratings of the Lost are gonna go to our head. It's dangerous to go alone, your iPod should have us, and Supergirl got our back, and that you can trust. We're blowing up crazy large, like our name was Alderaan, so let's give a hand to Doolin, cause this mic is on. Word.
All right, we are back for another round. It's been about 2 weeks. I haven't been able to get to the computer. Things have been kind of crazy here for me these last few weeks. Glad to do it though, and have to do it at just this time because we are just less than 24 hours away from the new season of Supergirl, Season 2, and I was a huge fan of Season 1. As a matter of fact, I saw that it hit Netflix, and I went ahead and I just jumped on it, like almost immediately as soon as I saw it was on there. So I went out into the interwebs, and I scoured, and I said, who could possibly sit down and talk to me for 30, 45 minutes about Supergirl? And I thought, you know what, I have this guy. His name is Charles. He is probably the biggest trove of comic book knowledge I've ever met in my life. Like, whereas I used to read it casually, this guy lived, breathed, slept, ate everything comic books, and even so to this day, well into his adult life. His name is Charles Baserap. He's a good friend of mine, and he's going to go ahead and join me today, and we're going to go ahead and just break down Supergirl. So, Charles Baserap, man, for the first time, welcome to Nerdtopia, man. I'm so glad to get you on board here.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's going to be a lot of fun tonight.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it, man. So about a year ago, I remember like we discussed it when they first released the trailer for this new series, Supergirl, that came on CBS. And I saw this trailer, and I saw Callista Flockhart on it, and it was like kind of an office setting, maybe kind of a little bit of office romance going on. And they introduced this new actress that I haven't really seen before. Apparently, she's been on Glee, which I don't watch. And my initial thought was like, shit, it's gonna be fucking Ally McBeal with superpowers. And I was kind of pleasantly surprised because it turned out to be not that.
Yeah, no, I had the same reservations when I first heard Callista Flockhart. I was like, all right, I know why they're doing it. They want someone with a little bit of star power. Someone that people have heard of outside of little niche shows like Glee, but I thought that it was going to be just her doing her thing and just stealing everything. They just acting out of character, just ruining the show for her. But she wound up being my favorite part of the show by the season's end.
Yeah,
she had just the right amount of character, the right amount of charisma. Her lines were funny. Her delivery was great. So she was utilized very, very well.
Absolutely. They gave she plays the character Cat Grant on the show, and they really did kind of give her some layers. And she wasn't just I saw that part of her on the trailer thinking she was just going to be this sort of just snippy, kind of very snobbish boss, and that was just going to be her one role on the show. And it really turned out not to be so. Like I said, they gave her a lot of layers. They gave her a lot of different dimensions to play with, and I was really pleasantly surprised on it.
And Kat's a tough character.
If
you read the comic books, she's had a lot of incarnations. She's had some where she's just basically like the buxom bimbo. I mean, in the Supergirl comic book, when she first meets Cat Grant, she makes a comment about how she can see some weird, plastic materials in her chest when she accidentally uses her X-ray vision on her, and she's seen as this vapid one, but then she's also a character in the old continuity with a lot of depth when her son was killed by what they thought was Winslow's shot, the Toyman.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a gun violence issue. It was a very dark issue with Superman in the late 90s. So she's been played so many different ways in the comic books. So we wasn't sure which Cat we were going to get, and the Cat that we got was kind of an amalgamation of all of them with a little bit of extra thrown in that only Callista Flockhart could have done.
Yeah, and just a cliff note to that. where I remember Cat Grant from, having been a kid of the 90s, was, I've always been a Superman kid. Always. But I remember in the 90s when Lois and Clark came out onto the scene on ABC, I was a huge fan of that. And they had that character in, and she was just in the first season, and she was really just there to be kind of a bimbo that chased Clark. And then that was it, and they got rid of her, and they never did it. Then she just kind of like disappeared from the show. You never saw her again after that first season. But this was a pleasant surprise for me, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Calista Flockhart's portrayal in it. Melissa Benoist, is that how her name is pronounced? I think it's Benoist.
I think that's how it's pronounced.
Yeah. She turned out, she wasn't what I had envisioned Supergirl to be from the comic books. It just, as far as her physical appearance. But she really kind of played it on a level that I was able to, I don't want to say relate to. Oh, hell, I'll say it. I was kind of able to relate to, because I think everybody with the Superman character and the Supergirl character and just sort of that mythos, they really kind of play to that, just the alien, the outsider wanting to be in. Because I think at one point in our lives we all feel a little alien, and she was able to do that with with a lot of charm. She had like a very sort of girl next door kind of charm to her, which was not what I was expecting from a Supergirl. Like, you expect sort of this sort of buxom, powerful beauty, almost kind of go and pummel these villains in the face, and that was not so much the case with Melissa Benoist's character. Yeah,
there were times I thought she was almost came off as a little bit too eager, like a little kid that gets like so excited to be in a school play. Like some of her lines were just read with this like over exuberance. Mm-hmm. But overall, she did play that. She did play that. She looked like something we haven't seen a lot from DC's output, as far as on the big screen or the small screen in recent years, is a lot of hope and a lot of fun.
Yeah,
she wants to be a hero. She wants to have some fun. She's not just she's not sitting there all dour and depressed. Mm-hmm. And something you touched on about being able to relate, my own struggles over the years with depression. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons Superman was such a big deal for me growing up was because I had these giant Coke bottle glasses, and I see this guy in Clark Kent that not only does he take off his glasses and become somebody else, he becomes Superman. Mm-hmm. And I had that hope that hey, one day I can take off my glasses and I can do these things that he can do. It was that sort of like relation to him as, like you said, being the outsider, and she definitely brings that a lot more with her life, just the way she has like a menial job, the way she's got a little bit of an overbearing boss, and the way she plays the role. It's so excited to go out there and do something and be somebody else. It really works.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that. And a point that you just made about it being kind of lighthearted and fun, I think it's a really interesting juxtaposition from what they're doing with the DC cinematic universe, because as I've spoken about on the podcast a few times before, is it's just sort of this dark and gritty world that they've created that is almost completely devoid of hope, despite the fact that Superman, they say line for line in Man of Steel, he represents hope. But they've presented they presented this entirely hopeless world, almost entirely hopeless world. And there was, think about like Batman v Superman, for instance, is it was just a very joyless movie, and that's one thing that I feel like they were missing from the DC cinematics. Is yes, there can be high stakes and there can be darkness, but if it's not put in contrast to happiness and joy, then you pull us down to that level. And I feel that Supergirl has made a really good balance of creating that sort of that joy on one side, while you have the darkness that comes in. It's usually from the aliens, and sometimes it's a little campy, and that's okay because it's a TV show. It can be campy from time to time.
Well, so some of the other things that also serves as a balance with is the other CW. Now they're all on CW. The other output of DC TV shows, barring Legends of Tomorrow, which is kind of its own little thing right now. But Arrow tends to skew towards the darker side. He's a much more Batman type, on the show. He's a lot darker, the Arrow show.
Right.
Where Flash is a little bit lighter and goes into its darkness. This is kind of like taking more of the light the Supergirl. So she's on one of the. So it looks like right now Flash is kind of like right in the middle between the light and dark, and she's on the light side and Arrow's on the dark side. And it offers a lot of different variety, of watching, and I can't wait to see them interact later this season.
Oh, absolutely.
It's going to be fantastic to see everybody on the screen.
Well, I think that's going to be the big thing coming this season is they're doing the four-part crossover, and it's going to cross over between all the shows, if I'm correct, where they're crossing.
Yeah, it's going to be
Supergirl
based
over.
on the Invasion storyline,
Perfect. Now
which was the Dominators.
okay. Do you want to? You've obviously read it. Do you want to give us a little rundown?
Yeah,
of
it
that?
was a 3-part miniseries back in I think the late '80s, probably like '88 around there.
Okay.
It wound up spreading into all the other comic books, but the basic gist of it was the Dominators were this alien race who had finally wanted to come up with a way to conquer the Earth, and they just got this entire conglomeration of other alien races to go out there and just take on the Earth and just take out all the heroes. They started out, they took over Australia, and then they just worked on from there. But eventually the heroes turned the tide, but there was a rogue Dominator who wanted to make his name known because they don't actually have names in their race. They have different sized circles on their heads that denote their caste in their caste system. So he wanted to make a name for himself. He's a lower caste. He created a gene bomb that took away all of the superpowers on the Earth. And that led to a whole other issue. That was a whole other fight. But of course, the good guys, won the day. And but I don't know how far into it they're going to go. But
With
they have
4
confirmed
episodes,
the Dominators will in fact be the big bad.
Yeah, well, and I think that's awesome, and that really fits in with what they did on this past season of Supergirl a lot, which is all of it relied around looking out for the alien threat. And they brought in there was threats from Earth as well, but the big overarching story of the season were the Kryptonian invasion and the story that went with Astra, Kara's aunt, and her husband Non. And there to take over Earth, and bringing in an alien invasion just really kind of fits for that. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the 4 shows mesh up, particularly with Supergirl being from, I guess Flash crossed over from the multiverse in the crossover they did in episode 18, which I think was obviously, honestly, like one of my favorite episodes of the season.
Oh, easy.
And it was a lot of fun, and there was a lot of camaraderie there between the two characters, and it was very lighthearted and playful, and and still serious but fun. And they left it wide open for him to come back, and obviously he's going to come back. Where do you see Supergirl crossing over? Because I think now that they all exist together in one form or another, and I think we were all kind of hoping that Flashpoint Paradox would be the event that merged the two worlds. And now it looks like it's not going to happen. I was hoping actually to see something happen, or at least with the storyline that brings them all together in December, that something would happen at the end that would kind of merge her world into our world. But they've said now at the Comic-Con this weekend, they confirmed that her universe is still going to stay separate from the Arrow, Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow universe. It's so frustrating.
But we know that there's some sort of Superman somewhere, maybe not yet, because when Rip Hunter in Legends of Tomorrow comes to recruit his team, he makes an offhand comment about how dark the future has gotten with Vandal Savage having conquered, and that he's seen Men of Steel fall. So he references the Man of Steel. We've seen the Legion ring reference. We've seen the JSA reference. So we've seen all of these things that point to a Superman existing somewhere in the bowels of this Arrowverse, as they call it, because that was the first show to kick off the CW these shows. But where Supergirl's going to fall into it, I don't know. I in some ways, I was talking with my wife about it, and she said that she feels that maybe Supergirl's a little bit out of place just because she is so powerful, and there's so many more alien threats involved, whereas most of the threats on the other shows tend to be a little bit more, not grounded in reality so much, but there's some sort of scientific explanation for it. Everything's kind of Earth-based for the most part.
Right.
So she might be a little bit out of place, but then again, you're bringing in Rip Hunter and everything. It's anything goes. As long as they keep doing those crossovers and having fun with it. Her and the Flash were actually on Glee together, apparently.
Yes.
So that added a lot to their camaraderie that you mentioned about them in that crossover episode. So, they have a lot of fun. They seem to really want to work together. So as long as it keeps working, I think they'll just keep doing it. They can make an annual thing of it.
Well, I really think if they haven't already, they're trying to snag some of that Glee viewership, because apparently there's a musical episode coming up between the two, which will be really intriguing to see how they pull that off. But you know what? I'll watch it.
Well, one of the early episodes of Flash had Flash actually doing singing karaoke, and it was just funny because that was the first time I actually knew that he was on. Guys, like I said, I never watched Glee, but I was like, wow, he's really, really good. And I looked up, and sure enough, he's from Glee, and actually the one who played Cat Grant's son this season. Supergirl, the first season, I believe that he was also from Glee, and he's Melissa's husband in real life.
Okay, all right. Well, that makes sense.
There's a lot of maybe they'll bring him back again for that, and bring back Adam Grant.
Well, we talked about that a little bit, and the one thing that I'm really excited to see, and as I think most people are, because it was their big selling point for this new season, is one of my beefs with the first season of Supergirl is I feel like they danced around the ghost of Superman a lot. Like he obviously, for a lot of reasons, they couldn't have Superman be in the show anywhere. But they, like I said, they danced around his ghost a lot. Like they inserted Jimmy Olsen in there as kind of Superman's friend, so he could be the guy that spoke on Superman's behalf from time to time. He could just run in like, "Oh, I just spoke to Superman, and he said," or a lot of times they would have a instant message pop up on Kara's screen from Clark, and they would chat. Or there was a few times, I think there's maybe twice in the first season, where he actually shows up. But they do it
as like a brief CGI dot.
It's very strategic. He was a CGI dot in the first part of the 2-part season finale, I think, where he just kind of shows up, and then he lands from a long distance. So you just you barely see him off in the distance. And I think there was one episode in the season where Supergirl is taking on Reactron, and she's in over her head, and she gets knocked the hell out. And she looks up in a haze, and you just kind of see, the familiar boots and red cape that just land in front of her. And you're like, oh, Superman showed up to help her out. And then she passes out and wakes up like, oh, yeah, your cousin showed up and saved you. And that was the end of that.
I know he's only in the first two episodes for right now.
And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with him just being in the first couple episodes. You don't really need to overkill on it. But there was a lot of times, I mean, they can always bring him back, obviously, but there was a lot of times in season 1 where I'm just like, Superman would step in this situation. Like, it's not just some street robbery. She's not just taking on, one Kryptonian or something like that. She's taking on a bunch of Kryptonians, and, Superman would be involved. But he didn't, and I
wanted was a throwaway line. Just to, hey, even before the episode starts or before it gets going off, like, hey, heard from your cousin. Yeah, he's off in space fighting Mongol. He's somewhere on another planet. Just to at least have some sort of mention of him not being in, just to foreshadow so that question doesn't raise up.
Well, and I think they did that. Go ahead.
No, good. I was saying just about foreshadowing. Like I recently watched, completely unrelated, but the movie The Conjuring. Mm-hmm. There's a scene where the guy investigates the basement. He comes back up the stairs and he leaves the box of matches on the stairs, and they kind of zoom in on it for a second. Mm-hmm. And then when the wife is stuck down there later on in the movie, she has a box of matches right there. You don't have to wonder, well, how convenient is this? She has a box of matches there. We already saw him place it there in a half hour before to kind of plant that seed.
Exactly.
So something like that, saying, hey, Superman's off planet. This way, when it comes down, you're like, she's fighting people from his own family. Mm-hmm. Why isn't he there? Why is he just leaving her out to dry?
Well, and they did kind of do that, I guess, in the finale a little bit when she shows up at the Fortress of Solitude. Like, hey, where the hell is my cousin? And the robot there is just like, oh, he's off-world dealing with an issue. Shit, I got to deal with this myself.
Yeah, there you go.
That was fine. I was like, okay, I can accept that. That's a deal. And then he shows up and he falls under the influence of the Myriad. And then you just don't see him again after that. And I was like, really? You didn't show up and say thank you? All right, well, whatever. But one thing I wanted to bring up, since we're talking about the possibility of Superman on the show, is I read an article, and once again it's an internet article, so you can't really trust it But it is always interesting to talk about. And for instance, I read an internet article a couple weeks back saying, yeah, the events of Flashpoint Paradox are going to merge the two universes, and then they come out and say, no, it's not going to happen. So of course you take everything you read on the internet with a grain of salt. That being said, I read that a lot of the show producers are going to be watching the ratings of Supergirl very closely when Superman comes on to basically consider giving him his own series. Now, some might argue that it's overkill because, Superman series has been done. Some might worry that they're going to mess it up, but I think that based on, I'm sure you saw the trailer for season 2 and Superman shows up and they team up together, and it made my happy heart dance because I was seeing this Superman that I've not seen in a long time, because God bless Henry Cavill, man, he's doing the best he can with what he's got, but he hasn't given me my Superman. And, I know everybody's feelings on what their Superman is going to be different. And a lot of people can say that, Henry Cavill's Man of Steel is just Superman for the changing times. I can get behind that idea, but he's still not mine. Basically, from what I saw on a 2-minute trailer, and once again, that's with a grain of salt, but from what I saw in a 2-minute trailer, it really did kind of seem to be like that old familiar sort of nerdy Clark Kent changing into Superman. Costume's a little bit different, the appearance is a little bit different, but it just seemed to get the spirit right.
Yeah, he seems like what they could have done in Smallville had they pulled the trigger 2 seasons earlier.
Yeah.
Because they had the whole they for a while they were so rigid with the no tights, no flights rule that they had. Then once they changed hands and they started getting a little bit more into the costumes with the Green Arrow and adding guys in like Flash, Impulse, and Cyborg and Aquaman and those guys, it started becoming a little bit looser, and they started trying to get it a little bit more like the comic books. Like that, by that point, it was a little bit too late, and Tom Welling didn't want to put on the suit.
That's a point of anger for me.
Yeah, I know. We've spoken about that. I mean, I didn't mind. I can see where it was coming from, but at the same time, it's like, what have you done, Tom? Come on, shoot by the dozen too.
Yeah.
But I do agree on what was his name? Houch? How's pronounce his last name? Tyler or Taylor? The new guy who's playing Superman.
Tyler Hoechlin.
Yeah, I like the way he looks. I was a little bit put off at first by the 5 o'clock shadow look like he had in some of the early pictures.
Right.
But whatever. That's and I'm not crazy about the way his cape attaches.
Looks, I think it looks almost kind of
good.
like a nod to a cross between the Injustice Superman and maybe a little bit of the New 52 thrown in there. Like, I'm okay with that. I can get behind it.
But that's that's a minor quibble. The way he plays the role, the way he's looking, and the way he's interacting so far in just the brief clips that we see, with him interacting with Kara, it seems like it'll be good. And 2 episodes. They said that he's open to do more.
Right.
And I think the first 2 episodes are obviously going to be a big ratings boost, just because it's going to be, one, it's the season premiere. It's on a new network. It's got a good following. Plus, you're introducing Superman, so it's automatically going to be a big one.
Yeah, it's Superman returning to the small screen. That's huge.
Yeah, and that's one of the things where they've got to really try and look a little bit long term. I don't want them jumping the gun and thinking because it did so great on the first episode that means it's going to be a huge. You got to watch, subsequent episodes. The same thing with comic books. Comic book comes out, it's the number 1 issue. It sells 100,000 copies, and then by issue 3, it's down to 20,000 copies.
Right.
Are people staying with it? That's what you want to see. Is are they just tuning in just to see it and get that that initial spike from the first episode? Are they going to stay with the show? And that's where they got to really look at the trends. 2, 3, 4 episodes down the line,
right,
to see how the show is really doing. To see and then bring him back again. And see how much it boosted up, if it really was him or if it was just the first episode bounce,
Yeah, could be either way. At any rate, like I was really happy to see the direction that the show itself took during the first season. I feel like they got off to kind of a bumpy start, but I feel like they course corrected very quickly. And it's a lot of it seemed to be kind of like, especially in the first couple episodes, like. It was almost kind of beating me in the face with the, hey, look, she's a girl. She's a female protagonist. She's a female protagonist. And I wanted to say, look, I get it, guy. I'm on board. I'm watching it, so I'm on board. You don't have to beat me over the head with it. I get it. I'm for it. Just stop, please.
Well, and that's why I loved Kat Grant's whole speech when she names her Supergirl. And
I feel like
Kyle
that was
a little bit offensive. How come he gets to be? That was perfectly worded.
I feel like that
was
was a preemptive strike.
It was really aimed at the internet.
I feel like that was a preemptive strike against the I don't want to get too political here because this is kind of a fun podcast.
Of course, yeah.
But I feel like that was a preemptive strike against, we'll say, the certain groups of people that were going to why can't they rename it Superwoman? ... Like, I get it, and they had a really great response for it. And of course, there was a little bit of a hubbub over it. But you know what? It actually fell silent pretty quickly, and I was happy to hear it.
The one thing I'd like to see though more of is more Supergirl plots and less retreads of Superman ones.
I noticed
being a
that.
comic book reader,
yeah,
there were so many storylines that were storylines from his stories that were just basically her. The new story was just her in his place.
Yeah,
there's a lot of Supergirl material. She's had a really weird history in the comic book. She's had the angel version of her that Peter David was writing years ago. She's had the Matrix version of her where she was just an alien protoplasm that took her shape. That was during the time when Superman was killed, during that era where she was hooking up with Lex Luthor II, which was the real Lex Luthor's brain in a clone body. It was all ridiculous. So she's had a lot of weird history over the years, but there's some good stories you can mine from her overall mythos. And I want to see a lot more of her standing on her own and not just doing a Superman story with a different lead character.
I noticed that particularly with the Black Mercy episode, and I was watching it, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure this was an episode of Justice League that I saw once, particularly with Superman.
And even her flare power leaving her powerless, that was something that was relatively new to the New 52 Superman that was added in just a couple of years ago by Jeff Johns. He's the one who created that solar flare power coming out of Superman and leaving him powerless for a while.
Right.
And when there's an issue where he decides to reveal himself to Jimmy Olsen, and Jimmy's like, well, I don't believe it's you, and he finally convinces him, and there's a robbery, and Superman goes up to the robber, even though he knows he doesn't have his powers on, but he's in his uniform, and he talks the guy into surrendering, just like Kara did in that episode where she didn't have her powers, and she goes in there, and she talks to the guy and talks him down. It was almost literally word for word, some parts of it. So I was like, it's a good episode, but I just read this 3 months ago in Superman comic book. Let her have a story. Show how powerful she is without just being her. I don't want a Superman story with boobs.
Well, yeah,
I want a good Supergirl story.
Or if you do feel the need
capable.
If you do feel the need to rehash some of the stories, then there's years and years of Supergirl comic books. Pull from those. That's great.
Yeah.
You don't have to use Superman and then change a he to a she. There's other stories out there.
That's what I think we'll see more of that now that there's like you said, it's got off to a little bit of a rocky start, and it's starting to find its footing a bit. Some of the CGI and the effects, if you notice, a lot of the fights are at night. It's a lot easier to clean up CGI.
I didn't think about that
when you do it at night.
Yeah, good thinking. I didn't think about that. Huh? Yeah, I was going to say the one thing.
There's sometimes it's a little bit dodgy. Even her fight scene though with her aunt, with Astra, was very much like the fight scene with Superman and Zod, where that whole camera angle flying towards her and punching her in midair and stuff like that.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Where it looked just like Man of Steel. I was like, wow, it's like lifted right from the movie, but at night.
Well, I'm okay with
I'm
okay with borrowing visuals from Zack Snyder, because for all my beefs and squabbles for Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, Zack Snyder can frame a shot, and I'm totally okay with that. The visuals were not my problem. The visuals actually were one of the positives of those movies. So if you borrow a little bit of that and take it into Supergirl, I'm fine with it. I'm not gonna squabble over that.
Oh yeah.
A couple things that I did
want to see how she interacts with Arrow and those guys though, the non-powered heroes.
Yeah,
that's going to be an interesting thing too. She's only interacted with Barry from the Arrowverse so far.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see her interaction with Oliver and the other characters from Legends of Tomorrow. It'll be kind of cool, and especially when you have such a diverse cast like that. Now, admittedly, I've not watched Legends of Tomorrow yet. I'm really behind on catching up on the CW verse, but I really think that as much as I enjoyed this show, this is going to be the one thing that kind of pulls me in and says, okay, you're a nerd. Go ahead and watch these shows, or else hand in your nerd card, and I'll say, okay, I'll sit down and watch it finally. Because especially if they're all going to tie in together, then all the other shows are going to get my viewership now, because now it's all relevant to this show.
Well, what I really like about it as a father is that, Arrow gets a little bit dark at times, yeah, but I have a 7-year-old, Anastasia is 7. Mm-hmm. She watches all these shows. Mm-hmm. And Supergirl is not just a show for me. It's a show that's getting my 7-year-old girl into the character in a way that she didn't have that outlet before. She has the cartoons that we've watched on Netflix, Justice League Unlimited, all those. Mm-hmm. But that she can, that she watches that show. She's allowed to stay up late. Mm-hmm. On those. We have Monday through Thursday.
Yeah, no. Now you got 4 nights a week, man.
It's great. But she sits there and she watches it, and even Lex, he's 2.5, but he hears that music, and the first thing he says is Supergirl.
I just want to point out
Superman girl. He kept calling her.
I just want to point out that your son's name is Lex. I'm just gonna drop that before we move.
Lex Luthor. He is.
Just preparing for him to take over the world.
He is my Lex Luthor.
You got to raise him right from the beginning. Just instill that sort of megalomaniacal dictatorship mentality in him, and then set him loose on the world and let him go.
but he watches it. It's a show. Not to sound hokey, but the whole family can watch. Mm-hmm. And I like that, because now, Anna has her own comic books that she gets and she collects. She collects the Harley Quinn comic and all these other ones, but now she wants to collect the Supergirl comic book. Mm-hmm. And I have no problem doing that, because it's starting to skew a little bit towards it's starting to turn into a little bit more of the show. They've added in, Jeremiah and the people from the DEO and stuff like that into the comic book now.
Yeah.
So it's fun to see, but she gets into the comic book and she collects Supergirl now.
Perfect.
And it's another comic book for her and I to talk about.
That's awesome.
And that's something I'm very much pleased with, that she has that extra thing. That right now the Marvel shows, as much as I like them, are a lot darker, and she can't watch Jessica Jones.
No,
she can't watch Daredevil in those shows.
Yeah,
it's just not for her.
Those are too dark.
But the CW shows, she's totally, it's totally okay for her.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing I wanted to touch on, switching gears here a little bit, is their portrayal of Martian Manhunter John Jones on the show. I found it to be kind of a pleasant surprise. It was a little different. It was kind of a cool way to work him in. But the one thing that I thought was kind of intriguing is, and I know, because we've read a fair amount of comic books, but the casual viewer might not know the character that John Jones assumed in order to take over the DEO. The one-time leader, Hank Henshaw, and they go in a little flashback, and they show like how Hank Henshaw found out that Kara was an alien. He comes to the house. Their father, who's played by Dean Cain, which is kind of a nice little nod, and the mother is played by Helen Slater.
and Helen Slater,
right.
Of course.
Nice little nod. Superman and Supergirl is her parents, her Earth parents, which was great. Nice little touch. But her father, Jeremiah Danvers, comes to work for the DEO, and then they go out into South America. They find John Jones, and there's a scuffle between Hank Henshaw and Jeremiah Danvers, and both are supposedly killed. As we learn later in the season, Jeremiah Danvers is still alive, and we never actually see what happens to Hank Henshaw. Now, interesting point. Once again, the name Hank Henshaw. I know it, but the casual viewer might not know. That he was known, probably best known for being the Cyborg or Cyborg Superman, particularly in the Death and Return of Superman series, was where he kind of made his appearance. So we didn't actually see that character die, and I'm wondering if sometime maybe not next season, but I think if the show keeps going down the line, especially with the introduction of Superman, do you think we'll see a return of Hank Henshaw as the Cyborgs at some point down the line?
See, I wonder, because, like you said, pre-Flashpoint, Hank Henshaw was Cyborg Superman. Not only was he, big for the Death of Superman storyline, taking over his place for a while, but he's also the reason why the Green Lantern universe got all completely messed up. Because he helped destroy Coast City, which sent Hal Jordan into a tailspin, which is what led him to kill all the Green Lantern Corps, which led to Kyle Rayner, which eventually led to Parallax. All of these things that stemmed out of, you can draw a direct line from that character and his actions to the present day DCU. He had a lasting impact. But in the current continuity, Cyborg Superman is not Hank Henshaw anymore. Cyborg Superman is actually Kara's biological Kryptonian father, who was turned into a cyborg by Brainiac when Brainiac took over parts of Krypton. So I'm wondering if we do see a cyborg Superman, are we going to see this version currently in the comic books that's fighting Supergirl? Because she doesn't know in the comic books just yet that it's her father.
Mm-hmm.
But we learned that in a storyline last year,
Mm-hmm.
that he was taken, brainwashed, and made into this, this thing
Right.
by Brainiac.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see them going that way just because it's what's freshest right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Hank Henshaw thing may have been a little thing for those of us like in the know to kind of wonder, like, hey, those red eyes flashing, is that because he's bad, or is that because he's Martian Manhunter? My first thought, honestly, was Martian Manhunter, just because the red eyes. It actually could have gone like maybe he's just being bad,
I didn't. Yeah, I thought maybe he was evil, and honestly, the thought of Martian Manhunter didn't even cross my mind. And when they revealed it, I was like, "Oh God, I'm so stupid. Why didn't I see it?" But yeah, they, as soon as he introduced himself as Hank Henshaw, I immediately thought like, "Oh, that fucker's evil." And then the red eyes flashed. I'm like, "Oh, he's Cyborg." But no, he's not. Not at this time, anyways.
Yeah, so I wonder they can go. They can teach. That's the thing about having so many different continuities, and over the years, the reboots and relaunches that DC's done, in particular in recent years with Flashpoint.
Yeah,
that they've reworked the history of a lot of these more familiar characters, so they could easily go either way and see the original Hank Henshaw they thought was dead and somehow has been transformed into whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that made the original Cyborg Superman so big was that he was able to take that form and look just like Clark.
Right.
It was obviously the big difference is Hank Henshaw is black in this universe, so he really can't pull off the "I'm Superman, or I'm your real father" type situation.
Right.
The way the new version of the Cyborg can, where it actually is legitimately Kara's father from Krypton.
And the great thing about this being a show that gets to stand apart from the comic books, and the comic books having as many revisions and revamps and reboots as there has been over the years, is you can literally just pick and choose whatever parts of that character you like or don't like, and use him to be the perfect character for whatever it is you need. And that's I think if we do see the return of Hank Henshaw, he's going to be a major villain. And I don't think it's going to be until probably not season 3. I think season 2 is going to likely focus a lot around the search for Jeremiah Danvers.
Oh yeah, and which could also dovetail into the end of that season being the Hank Henshaw reveal. Except they were both missing in action.
Right. And that'll be pretty interesting to see what they go with it. And We're going to wrap it up here in the next few minutes, but before we go, I want to ask you just a little bit. Season finale. I'm going to ask you what your opinion on this is. Season finale. Very last thing that happens is they leave us on a little bit of a cliffhanger. A Kryptonian pod lands on Earth, and Kara and her sister go out there to investigate it, and she pulls off the lid to the space pod. And she has this look of surprise mixed with shock on her face, and then they cut it, and we don't get to see what that is. What do you think's in there?
Comet the Super Horse. No.
Crypto.
I mean, I was thinking anything from Crypto to someone that she knew from her planet. Maybe her mother. Or somebody else that got off world. That she knew of. Someone she had to recognize, because there was recognition there. It wasn't just, oh my God, I found an alien pod. It was, oh my God, I found an alien pod, and this is in there. There was a definite recognition, a flash of recognition in her eyes that she knew this whatever it is shouldn't be here. So how is it here?
Well,
so,
here's
I mean,
what I'm
for
thinking.
all we know, it could even be from the other universe.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it's maybe from an alternate universe, because she said, if I remember correctly, that's my pod. But it can't possibly be her pod, because her pod's at the DEO. So I'm thinking maybe it's her from an alternate world, possibly. They have a lot.
Which could be how she gets to, which could be one of the things that leads her to cross over with the other universes, or explain why there's no Supergirl in Flash's world, because it was on its way and got sidetracked and fell into the thing because of Flashpoint. Because one of the big things in Flashpoint I don't know. I mean, they obviously weren't planning all this beforehand because they didn't know if the show was going to get renewed or not until very late. But one of the big key points in Flashpoint in the comic book is when Barry went back and saved his mother, he changed things around so much that the rotation of the Earth was off by just a couple of seconds, and that led to Superman's pod landing in Metropolis and destroying things and then being captured, as opposed to an empty field in Kansas. So if it's possible that Barry's Flashpoint completely screwed things up, that a pod that would have landed on their Earth to become Supergirl or Superman at some point or whatever wound up falling through the cracks and going there. Like again, we've talked about there's so many different iterations of the universes that it could really go so many different ways. But my money is on something that she recognizes as something that either she knows or like it's possibly like you said, like a younger version of her or another version of her that she recognizes as her pod.
All right. Well, it'd be kind of cool. Well, we don't have to wait much longer to find out because it's airing in less than 24 hours from now. I'm super excited, no pun intended. Definitely going to give it a watch, and I believe we'll let that run for a little bit, and then we'll come back and maybe talk about season 2 of Supergirl and this big 4-part crossover they got coming up.
Yeah.
Hey, wanted to
it's gonna be fun.
wanted to ask you, maybe if you're not too busy, we'll get you in here sometime. We can talk about Luke Cage and some of the stuff going on in this Netflix series here.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic.
I haven't gotten to watch Luke Cage just yet, just because we've been so busy with other stuff. But we will be watching, or we will be binging them all one night, I'm sure.
I'm
about my wife.
I'm about 3 episodes in, and so far I like it. I like it pretty well. Just haven't had a lot of time, but I'll probably get to watching it this week. Yeah, man, we'll definitely wrap on Luke Cage and the direction of that with Jessica Jones and Iron Fist and the possibility of Defenders coming up, and we'll speculate and fanboy away on that one as well, man.
Good deal, yeah.
That's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this week. Thanks for joining us so much today, guys, for Welcome to Nerdtopia. I'm Doolin Dalton.
And I'm Charles Baserap.
And that's going to be it for us. Thanks for nerding out with us, guys. Have a good night.